The Honourable Michael Woodhouse.
Well, Mr Speaker, you can say one thing about New Zealand First, they are nothing if not predictable. And yesterday we heard speeches in the motion of support for the people of Orlando in the wake of that tragedy. I want to touch on a couple of them. The first was from Kevin Haig. One of the most compelling interventions I think I've heard in my time here, expressing condemnation at the Act and arawa and support for the community, for the LGBTI community, and for the Muslim community. And then we heard another speech, without doubt, Mr Speaker, the most vile, spiteful, hateful and ignorant intervention I have heard in my time in this Parliament, that from the leader of the New Zealand First Party, Winston Peters. And I reckon it plumbed a new low, even by that member's standards. By drawing a nexus between a United States citizen born in that country and this country's immigration policy, and frankly his call for some kind of Anglo-Saxon values statement to be signed up for new migrants absolutely epitomises how ignorant and out of touch that party is. Now today I hosted the World Refugee Day annual function here at Parliament. And I challenge Mr Peters to go along to functions like that and listen to the speeches that we heard today from a 16-year-old Syrian, from an 18-year-old Rwandan, or to go to the Mangere Refugee Resettlement Centre and go to a Pōwhiri and see the energy and support for the values that we hold dear, the values of freedom and peaceful coexistence, of harmony and diversity, and then stand and tell this House that we need some kind of values statement. Pauline Hanson's got nothing on Winston Peters, Mr Speaker. I wonder, actually, if he's Miss Hanson's older brother, because they certainly sound very much the same. Now, at the World Refugee Day function was a fellow by the name of Yahya. Now, Yahya has the distinction of being the first Syrian refugee to arrive into New Zealand under the emergency places response this government put in place a couple of years ago. And he spoke at the World Refugee Day event last year and rather cheekily put his hand up and said, "I'm good at what I do, I've worked in a warehouse in logistics, I speak pretty good English, does anybody have a job for me?" And actually there was an approach that day by a very large organisation in New Zealand that was trying to see if they could help. Sadly, that didn't come about. And I met Yahya again today, a year later, and he tells me that he is still looking for paid employment. And I was very sad to hear that, but not that surprised, because that's a typical story we hear around the country. Oh, were it the case that every refugee we take could tell the same story as the speeches that we heard today. That would be great. But unfortunately, that's not the case. Despite being held up as one of the world's best at settling refugees, we still have fewer than 40% of those refugees in paid employment 10 years after they arrive. Their children don't do as well at school as ours. Immunisation and other health services are not taken up in the same rate. We need to do better, which was why the New Zealand Refugee Resettlement Strategy was put in place 3.5 years ago. It is working. Progress is being made, but it's slow and we need to do more, which is why I'm really pleased this week, in addition to the announcement of a significant increase in the quota of one-third. Well, that member says double the quota. Well, he can go and ask his colleagues who were in the Parliament from 1999 to 2008 why they did nothing. Not a thing. And why would they say that? Yes, we have 60 million displaced people in this country. When they were in power, there were 42 million people displaced, and they did nothing. No strategy, no increase in the quota, more lion in opposition, but pussycats in government, no money, a decaying facility which the Prime Minister will open on Saturday. So I'm very proud of the response and the decision, the announcement that was made this week to raise the refugee quota by 1/3, and we will redouble our efforts to make sure that every single one of those refugees settles well, thrives, is independent from the state, but more importantly is free of the vile, disgusting rhetoric that we heard from Winston Peters and the New Zealand First Party. It's a speech and a rhetoric we've heard long enough, going to a smaller and smaller cohort of New Zealanders, and I think that's a good thing.
Order. Dr.